Okay. I'd like to call to order the previously recessed, I'll start over again. At our January 6th regular monthly planning board meeting, we recessed to a time date specific period of today at 9 a.m., the 13th of January, to finish up with our new business item number 5, UDO audit and rewrite discussions. I'd like to start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, for the recessed meeting, the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Prior to starting the number 5 item that we recessed for, I wanted to make a note in our audience today. We have a soon-to-be new, or once he's sworn in, planning board member, Gerard Burns. Thank you for putting your hand up, Gerard, and we look forward to working with you here on the planning board. Richard Dysinger, the other soon-to-be sworn-in planning board member that makes us a 5-board panel as we're outlined in the UDO. Couldn't make it this morning. He's having a medical procedure, but we'll introduce him at a future time. All right, starting off with UDO audit and rewrite discussions. Chad, I don't know if we want to start with Wes McLeod from Council of Governments, or if you want to make some opening comments.
Mr. Chair, no, I will introduce Wes and turn it over to him on his memo, his PDF or PowerPoint presentation, and then we can go into the questions and all that. So I'll turn it over to Wes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Chad, for having me here this morning. As the chair alluded to, this is effectively the kickoff for the UDO update process, and so today we're here really to talk about what it is that we're going to embark on, what's kind of the scope of this project, your role, my role, staff's role, and then close out the meeting with, at the tail of this meeting, really want to just engage in discussion about things about the UDO in generalities, things that you feel like are important to keep, things that you feel like, or maybe some things that you want to change, and things that maybe you want to add. And certainly it's not going to be an exhaustive set of items because we are going to go full-blown section by section through the ordinance, but I just want to initiate the conversation. And just to start, I think that this board is familiar with, what a unified development ordinance is, but I just want to, set us on the right foundation here. So, in Sunset Beach, you already have a UDO, so we're not creating one, but your UDO contains all these different items: your zoning ordinance, which are your zoning regulations, your subdivision regulations, your stormwater regulations, and your flood damage prevention ordinance. So we're not proposing to get rid of any of those things, but about 15 years ago, maybe closer to 20 now, UDOs became very popular because historically there was a zoning code that was separate from a subdivision, separate from a stormwater, and so you had all these different chapters that you would have to go through to understand what the particular development regulations are. With the UDO, they're all in one document, all contained under one book, and that's really the key of what effectively a UDO is. See. So the zoning ordinance piece of that, the zoning code, that's, and I just want to point these couple things out. Zoning regulations have different enabling laws than subdivision, for example. Zoning specifically regulates uses for a particular piece of land. So, we're on a piece of land that's zoned to allow this town hall to exist here today, for example. That's very different than taking a big tract and divvying it up into different parcels. That's subdivision of land versus building something and utilizing the land for a particular type of development. That's the heart of really what zoning is, and a lot of what we're going to focus on. You have uses that are established by the zoning districts. They may be unique characteristics, reasons why certain areas of the town are zoned the way that they are. Across southeastern North Carolina, particularly in our beach communities, the zoning reflects, in most cases, the development that was there prior to there being, in fact, zoning in place. So, of course, on the island, we had single-family residential homes. Accordingly, it's zoned for single-family residential homes and duplexes in certain instances. There are also the development approval processes that are outlined in there. What do you do to get a zoning permit, to do a rezoning, et cetera? And then, of course, in your ordinance, we have development standards and supplemental regulations. So we may continue to call supplemental regulations, or what I term them as is use standards. That's where you look at a particular use and say, for example, a gas station. You may have a clause that they need to put the pumps behind the building, or whatever it may be. You have certain regulations for lighting of the canopy. That's specific to that use. That's a supplemental regulation for that particular use, and that's going to be a big piece of us going through this UDO in particular, because you've got a lot of supplemental regulations, and we may need to revise, tweak, and add others. And then, of course, this has been something that's been discussed and you're familiar with, but certain uses require a special use permit approval process, and that's all under the terms of the enabling legislation for zoning, and that's a quasi judicial approval process, and that here in Sunset Beach goes to the Board of Adjustment. You go over to communities next door, or in southeastern North Carolina, the planning board may approve the special use permits, or the town council. It's really just a matter of preference for the local government.
And our planning board used to be the Board of Adjustment as well.
Correct.
And we've kind of lived that, and we've had situations even in the last 12 months where exactly what you're saying has occurred. So, good.
Stormwater regulations here in Sunset Beach, they're effectively administered through Brunswick County. So depending on what we find about the audit, I don't anticipate, I'm not an engineer, I don't anticipate that we're going to change any sort of engineering standards related to stormwater. But if there's administrative provisions related to stormwater, or a discussion about impervious coverage limitations, that's things that we may consider. I know that you guys have changed your stormwater regulations or your impervious coverage limitations somewhat on and off the last couple of years, and so we want to make sure that those are fully aligned and very clear moving forward. Flood damage prevention ordinance is also in your UDO. That is a document that regulates all development in special flood hazard areas, so in particular on the island, and then we have several instances, of course, on the mainland, pretty much closer to the ICW, that are also in the special flood hazard area. That document has to follow basically regulations that are outlined in the Code of Federal Regulation. That's a federal rules that are then worked out through the state of North Carolina on the model code. So the reality is we don't have a lot of leeway in modifying that ordinance. There are minimum standards that the town has to abide by if they want to be a participant in the National Flood Insurance Program. So I'm not anticipating that we're going to necessarily delve into the flood damage prevention ordinance, but we can, obviously it will be available for discussion. And I believe you recently updated this, correct, Chad? Was that before your time? No, no, the flood damage prevention ordinance
Yeah, that was
With-
before my time.
with new maps. That's been done fairly recently. So, but I just wanted to point that out for everyone. So, in terms of your role, planning board role, you guys are going to have a pretty heavy lift here the next 14, 16, 18 months, however long it takes to get this document out of the planning board and to town council. And so, and I just want to talk a little bit about that. And you may have questions about kind of what your role is, but obviously participating and providing feedback to me as a consultant and staff, attending meetings and reviewing draft material. Pete, we discussed this a little bit in Sybil. The way that we'll handle when you get deliverables, you'll be provided hard copy material. And so if next week, for example, we needed to review, or next month, next time we met, we were intending for you to review material, you would be given it today or in advance of that meeting so that you have time between now and that meeting at your discretion, at your convenience, to review that material. We will not give you something at 2 days prior or the day of and expect you to be prepared to review it. The other important part of this is we will keep this material as hard copy. We will not be sending out things digitally, and there's certain reasons for that. It is a public record, but I have experienced cases where something is inadvertently sent out or distributed to someone who doesn't understand exactly what they've got. That it is draft material, and the next thing you know, controversy has occurred when it didn't need to happen in the first place. So that's how we'll handle that material. And it's also easier for you guys, or at least for me, to have a hard copy of this rather than reading it on the computer.
So, Chad, I would assume then that we'll have a hard copies put in our box here that we'll utilize. That Wes would send it to you.
I'll get with Wes on how we do that in advance.
It'll just depend. In a lot of cases, I'll be bringing the material, the printed material for you.
Okay.
If there's an instance like we got to talk about when we're going to meet next, that we need to get material in your box, we'll work on that too. And so, as planning board, you're also striving to advise a process based on what you believe to be the citizen-based desires of the town. So that's effectively your role. You're an advisory board in this process, steering committee. And then the fourth part of that is we're trying to seek objective outcomes, shared objective outcomes through shared goals of the citizens, town staff, and myself. There's going to be times where we're going to disagree. You guys may feel very strongly about something. I'm not here to insert policy. I'm here to figure out, from an administrative and legal standpoint, the best path moving forward for certain items. And similarly, there'll be some things that staff feels like is important. So we got to figure out on building consensus how we keep moving along in this process. That makes sense.
It does. There are going to be many items then that the planning board will feel need to be revised. You'll feel that it's fine as it is. We'll have a reason for wanting to do it, and it's up to us to sell it, I guess. But town council obviously has to be, and I think you're getting there, in this process.
Right.
Because they're the ones that are going to be saying approved or, yes or no.
That's right. They're going to be the ultimate. So for you guys, the goal is for us together to get the document where you want it to be. From there, depending on how we handle things, there may be a joint meeting between the planning board and the town council, but ultimately it's their responsibility at that point. So there may be things, for example, that are put in the document that the planning board wants to see happen, the town council disagrees with. They're the buck stops with the town council, and so that'll be up to them on what they do or do not want to change, add, whatever it may be. And that's typical, and that's just part of the process.
I would also assume that the path of the communications path between the planning board and you is going to be through town staff, through Chad, and
Great
Ms.
question.
Anglin, because there may be some things that we come up with that they say you can't do that, and there'll be a legal reason for it.
Correct.
But so
Yeah.
they kind of need to be that buffer rather than us just lobbying with you direct.
Sure. Yes. All correspondence should go officially through Chad or Lisa. I think Chad's probably ideal, just so that there's the appropriate, public record, and Chad will send it to me as he sees fit. And then standard open meeting rules: don't be sending emails to each other or so forth. We mentioned this before, just the same as anything else. With that in mind, about talking about trying to achieve these shared goals, and really the long range goals of the town, I did want to at least put out there. I know this is from 2016, the vision statement for you all. And I'll read it. I know you can read it as well. But the town of Sunset Beach intends to promote and support the orderly economic and aesthetic growth and development of the community in accordance with its adopted land use plan and development related ordinances. The town desires to maintain its unique coastal town character by promoting lower density and single family residential development as a primary growth pattern. Town also recognizes that it coexists with a fragile coastal environment, and it shall seek to preserve and conserve the land and estuarine water, including its beach and golf course amenities that have made this community a highly desirable place to live. Furthermore, the town values being responsive to the public and improving the quality of life for all its citizens. To this end, the town shall continually seek the improvement, input, and various viewpoints of its citizens during the town's official consideration of land use and development decisions. And so where we need to, obviously the land use plan is there to provide any guidance. I've been fortunate to work alongside the town for a good number of years, so I don't know everything about the town, but I have a pretty good understanding of certain things that are important to you all.
There are certain things that are not in our UDO, or at least are not addressed with any detail, that are in our municipal code. Do you foresee maybe making the two more compatible, or?
That's a great question. So as part of the audit, we'll also go through the general code. And so we'll look at the general code. There's, junked vehicles, littering, things like that. Does not need to go in the UDO. But if there's things like streets, for example, I don't know if that's been added. Has that since been added to the UDO yet?
So one of the things we talked about was bringing Chapter 98 into the
Okay.
UDO. The timing of that was middle to late of 2021.
Okay.
And as we decided to move into this process, we decided to hold off, keep Chapter 98 in the general code, and as we go through this process, bring 98 into the UDO.
Okay. So that's a perfect example. So that's the street standards. That really needs to be in your UDO, and then if there's anything else in there, we'll point out, hey, this is in the general code, probably needs to be pulled into the UDO. All right. So before we jump into sort of general discussion in terms of feedback from you folks on the code itself, is there questions about process, procedure, how all this is going to be handled?
I think your memo with the phase 1 and phase 2 is quite clear. I just had a chance to read it starting this meeting, but it's Ron or Sybil, you have any questions?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. And we'll do our best to align our schedules based on this anticipated schedule. In my experience, things come up, whether it be COVID, we got to cancel a meeting, who knows what it is, but we're going to strive to move this forward month by month as best we can to get this document finished.
The one thing that I've discussed with Lisa, I think I've discussed with Wes with this as well, is that we plan on utilizing the second meeting of the month, so to speak, for this alone. This will be a standalone meeting, not conjointed with anything else that might be on our regular planning board agenda. So that will keep it separate. That way this will be time just devoted to this. Wes, my question for you is, I know, speaking of, with your experience, my experience, and talking with colleagues, you're you're scheduling this more with the council. Is that where you tend to get longer into the process, is going through article with them, or is that where the joint work session more comes into play?
So the council will receive a full revised or proposed UDO that will have been recommended by this board at that point in time. That document will have strike through additions, etc. And it will be, at that point, it's going to be up to the council. The council may request they need 6 months to review it, or 3 months, or 2 months. That's up to them. And it takes a while to wrap your head around this. It's great that John's here, for example. So and I don't know to what degree John will be here, or if there's going to be a liaison here. But it is also helpful from time to time to have council members present, not constituting a full meeting, but at least so they have an idea of what's going on.
When you say it's going to go to council, Wes, town council, do you mean after we've finished phase 2?
Yes, sir.
And we have it, we've gone through the audit, and then we've gone through, call it the rewrite.
Yes, sir.
Right. It would be, and I don't know that I'm asking for permission, because I may just do it anyway, but I would certainly like to have unofficial dialogues with some of town council members, particularly if it's something that I think a particular town council member has a background in a certain topic that we're reviewing. But would plan on having those continuous conversations, off the record, but appropriate, not appropriate.
Yes, you just don't. You cannot constitute what would be an open meeting.
No, I mean, I'm talking about one-on-one.
Yes.
Okay? Or at most with 2 members of council at the same time.
Sure. But again, remember, they're going to have their crack at this. So I'm not saying don't engage your council, but our goal is to get this document, out and make sure you all are comfortable with it. If there's things that you feel like aren't going to be aligned appropriately, absolutely. We should probably bring them up so that we're not wasting time per se. But first and foremost, as planning board, we need to make sure we try to align it with what the council wants to see. The council will get the document done, and they're going to make the changes that they feel need to be made in any case.
Okay.
Well, if it's going to take us 18 months or whatever the number is, then is it going to take them 18 months to go through it? I mean, would it not behoove us to maybe have a member or 2 sit in on the meeting?
That's up to the council, and
then it would streamline it.
That's up to council. And I don't know if you guys have any liaison rules or requirements or anything like that in place. Just kind of open.
Council can discuss it Tuesday.
Okay.
I'll make it an agenda item.
See if someone is named as a liaison, that person potentially could be a revolving member of whether it's John or someone else at the next meeting. But it takes us so long because we're going article by article drafting material, and so I don't want to speak necessarily for John, but the council also has some bit of confidence, I would hope, in you all as serving in the advisory role for this, for putting it together. That they know that you guys are going to be reviewing this material and making sure that what we propose is not out of line with what the town wants to see happen. If that makes sense.
Yes. And we're appointed by town council. So
absolutely.
We know, we've seen the organizational chart.
Correct. So that's a good question, and we'll go through and you'll get article by article. We'll receive comments, and at the very end, once we've got all the articles together, you'll then get a fully revised with all of the comments. And I don't believe I've met Katie, but one of the things that'll be important when we get into the draft stage is, for example, you'll get Article 2. We'll come to a meeting and review Article 2, and Mr. Chair may say, hey, on page 2-4, we need to make a change here to whatever it may be. And in the minutes, that's one of the things, we don't need necessarily verbatim minutes, but where we've got key items that are discussion points or sticking points where we're trying to build consensus, making sure that in the minutes they're properly reflected. And of course, all those updates will also go into that document when you get in a final copy.
Would those meetings be public meetings?
Yes, sir.
So, okay, we're not talking about any closed session meetings where everything was open.
Yes, sir. All right. Great questions. Okay. So let's, I've got a couple bullets here and we don't have to go by these, but I'd be curious if anyone had thoughts on things when we're talking about the feedback and the UDO, things that you feel like, are important to keep. It doesn't need to be exhaustive, but big picture things. I've got three different items here, things that we feel like we should keep, change, and maybe things that we need to add that are not addressed. So with that, anything any members want to just point out in terms of, this is something that we should strive to keep as it relates to your existing ordinance.
And I didn't want to get into the weeds.
We don't need to get in the weeds.
But we've got, I'll give you a general comment, and it can go on to probably 5 or 6 other topics. Fire pits have been something that has been, I don't want to say controversial, but unclear. And even within our ordinances, we have conflicting wordings in different sections. And so things like that just need to be brought up. Right now, you could make the argument that they're not allowed, fire pits. But that's something that certainly there's dozens and dozens of them in use throughout our municipality, and our code enforcement are ignoring it because they're trying to be reasonable. So it's things like that I think our UDO rewrite can address. That's kind of very specific, though.
That's a good question. In most of our local government, and I don't know where this is addressed or if it sounds like it's maybe not addressed, that's a general code item typically, and they've got requirements for distance from the house, distance from other people's property line. Is that something that you guys don't have, or does Lisa?
Well, it's weak.
The fire chief is doing an amendment for that section.
Okay.
Right now.
Okay. But that's a good question. But yeah, I know we've got at least 2 or 3 other beach communities that have specific regulations for fire pits.
Yeah, and speaking more and hopefully going along with what Pete said, there's conflicting stuff throughout the UDO.
Yes.
And between that and fire pits are an example, but there's other examples in there where you have definitions for stuff, and you go to look at standards for the definition, and there's no standards for the definition. So it's cleaning up confusion. That's really the main part of this. And when Sam and his staff, or Wes and his staff, getting ahead of myself, come through that, you'll see stuff where that comes into play.
And we've dealt with that before, even things as simple as the definition of an umbrella or the definition of a townhome we didn't have one. And we're here now approving townhomes without a definition as to what one really even is.
Right.
So but yeah, he's spot on there.
Yes, those are things in particular that will be pointed out as part of the code audit, the UDO audit. What else? Anything?
Well, I guess my question maybe is to your second point. I guess we previously, a year or so ago, had like a long list of items, many of which were UDO items we were going to work on. Tree protection, I think architectural standards for all commercial properties. I guess you looking at that list to see that it's in things that we wanted to update that we incorporate into rewrite? Or you're just looking at what we got? I mean, because we did, I can't even remember without going back to it was a year ago now.
I think I've got a copy of that.
To go back to that
Right.
piece of paper, we had like probably at least 6 items that were UDO related for some big changes, some little changes, and then other proposals. So I guess, are you going to try to scoop that all up and put it in there, or we got to remember to go back and look ourselves
Well-
when we review it
Well,
to pick some of that up?
I would like to get a hold of that list, but
get
naturally, as we go through the sections, for example, when we get to a section on design guidelines or whatever it may be, the discussion will be spurred. Hey, depending on what your current understanding or feeling is on the matter, we need to tighten these up or expand them to all commercial buildings or whatever it may be. And
If we want to change, if we want to suggest a change, an edit in the existing UDO, it's typically going to be because I feel personally that something needs to be changed.
sure.
I'll give you an example. I'm opposed to the majority of our zoning districts allow an increase in building height if the setback from the street is increased. And on certain shaped lots, that could be huge.
Right.
You could be adding 10 foot to the building height,
Mhm.
which is really, I think, contrary to our mission statement for
Sure.
the town and the neighborhood.
Yep.
But that's my personal feeling. How do we deal with things like that? Is it up to me to lobby enough with town council and you and Chad to get us to consider removing that from
So
Article
that's
6?
that's one of these items where we'll get to where everyone's not going to be on the same page on something, and we just got to, just the same as I've worked with you guys on text amendments in the past, we
Yes.
just got to figure out to get to consensus. And there may be items that we have to vote on, on what ultimately the change should be, striking that provision or modifying it so there's a
Upper
I-
limit?
so there's a limit, whatever it may
Sure.
be. But yes, and so when we go through the audit, some of that discussion is going to come out, and then it will come out again when you actually get the draft material and say, hey, we discussed this in the audit. I'm not sure if this is exactly where we want it to be, and that there'll be, so there's going to be, kind of two opportunities here.
I'll make
for
a
these.
dollar wager with you that we still won't be able to figure out a proper fence stipulation.
You may be correct.
It's because we've beaten that, and it's complicated because we're trying to write something that will affect all shaped lots,
Mm-hmm.
corners, interior.
Signs too. I bet you we don't come up with a sign one that works either.
Well, but we'll work. We'll improve what we have.
We'll improve what we, yes. But
I
yes.
guess some of the question is that, I kind of brought that up in this. Is there a better way to build in, no way you could ever write a code to cover all scenarios.
Correct.
But to build in I don't want to say the exception, or how to handle something that's slightly outside where you're not having to do a whole text rewrite to fix it for one person, one lot, one weird shaped thing or something.
You can turn it over to the Board of Adjustment as a special
But that takes forever.
case.
Mm-hmm. As
Well-
a variance, but yes, our goal is to make sure that
I guess is there a streamlined way of doing it? If it's a simple under a dollar amount, because it just seems like some small, like say there's some odd shaped thing that the fence thing would end up being like not even connected or something. That could be fixed at the planning board or at the staff level.
If it
That you can write the way of fixing it without redoing a whole shooting match.
well, that the statute is clear on if we're varying the terms, basically varying the laws in the town. The only way to do that by state statute is go through the variance process. But if there's our goal is, there's holes in your ordinance, there's things that aren't right, there's things that are conflicting. Those are the things that we need to get certainly fixed. And so there may be instances, you're right, Ron, absolutely right. We can't possibly plan for everything that's going to come down the pike. And so some of that also falls on making sure that the document is a good tool for staff when they got to make a call on an interpretation. And so they're not left with too many questions that they need to answer about somebody's proposal.
These meetings that we're going to have, because they are going to be official, open, public meetings, would have the same procedure that we have now, where the public only can talk during comment periods, say before it beginning and end of meeting. I mean, we would be following those same procedures, just like a planning board meeting.
Yes, sir. And it's at your discretion whether you want to allow public comment or not. But yes, just like a planning board meeting. So you don't have to allow public comment if you don't want, or you can. It's
Well, the public really won't know what we're talking about. They won't know in advance as to what the subject is, because it's going to be hard copies that only we have.
Yep.
So it's not as if an agenda is going to be published by town
we'll,
staff.
We'll just know that we're talking about whichever article,
Well, I see we have the public hearing at the end.
Mhm.
Would it be wise to put a public hearing before sending it to council?
Sure.
To let the public take a look at it and argue with us first?
Sure. That's certainly
If
when,
that-
It's a good idea.
Maybe, I mean, obviously you got to have the final one too, but
Mhm.
maybe we would head off any council
sure.
stumbling blocks or whatever that, because quite frankly, a citizen can come up with a good idea,
Sure.
and then now we got to double back and to us whether we should maybe move up
The problem is they won't know what they're.
Mhm.
They won't have a copy of it.
would it
Well,
be not
It will be
possible
up to so
to
what-
publish a draft?
Yes, that's where you guys get to the point where you're comfortable enough to say, hey, we've got this thing, whatever it is, 95%, we feel comfortable with it. Let's post a draft to the town website.
So every page would have to say draft on it. I mean, across the
Everything that you will
watermark.
get will
It's-
have a
it's
watermark
easy.
on it. It will have a date on it, and things that will be. We'll also provide you a style guide, but things that are added are going to be underlined in red. Things that are deleted will be, or recommended for deletion, will be double strike through in red. So
I think maybe we should. I don't know how to do it. We can't
You-
adjust our schedule.
it'll be up to you guys when you get to that point. You're
It
not
seems
going
like that'd be a good idea, is to publish a draft at, like I said, 95% confidence level,
absolutely.
and then have some sort of public session.
Yep. And
Where
that would be my recommendation too. I'll tell you, by the time we get to that point, you're no longer want to see my face. You no longer want to come in here, and you're never going to want to hear the 3 letters UDO again.
Ron's point is extremely well taken too, because historically, when we had the prior revision, we'll call it, to the UDO, it appeared as the next few years went on and situations came up, people would say, hey, that used to be in the UDO, but it's not anymore. What happened? And people were claiming that there was fraud.
Yes.
It was what I'm sure you know.
I'm very familiar with that. There was an error, and inadvertently, I believe, although I don't know, there was sections left out, and part of that was that process was the underline and the strike through process was not properly done. So I will have a master copy also that I know everything that's been deleted or changed, and when you guys get something, it will be underlined, strike through, or what have you.
Sure. Okay. I just wasn't sure if you were familiar with that
I was very
public
familiar.
outcry.
Yes, and there was a time many years ago that potentially there was going to call into question the legality of the document that was ultimately adopted, because it wasn't done with a true ordinance. But anyways, those sections, most of those have been added back in, basically the fill section.
Yeah, but painfully.
painfully,
yeah,
yes, that was a big mistake.
Well, I mean, similar to the federal system, I mean, a rule has to be published in the Federal Register, and there's a public comment period.
Oh,
So
yeah.
essentially, we're saying kind of mirror that without the way the public, when we get
Yep.
to a 95%
Yep.
confidence level, you
Yep.
publish it at a draft, and then there's a
Yep.
written comment period from the citizens, or maybe one meeting where
That's right.
we can trash it out.
And we will also strive to, when you guys are comfortable and as we go, to make sure that our development partners are aware of this. The development community is aware of changes that are being made. We're not doing this in a back room, though. This is every meeting. Anybody who wants to come and show up is welcome to attend.
Well, we'll be on YouTube too, right?
Yeah,
I would
and-
suspect. Yeah.
that right too.
Mhm. Okay.
Any other comments in general about this process, or concerns with the UDO you feel like warrant mentioning?
Wes and the
Yeah.
Wes and the board, I have already forwarded you the staff report of the future agenda item that I took last year. And planning board, I've taken that. I'll report it to you after we get out of today's meetings. So you can look at what I sent Wes and provide me any comment that you might have. But that has already been taken care of.
Good.
And most of those items on the list line up with what I've talked to Wes a little bit previously about adding in, changing, and stuff like that. As I've worked in months since we've talked about that staff report, there's a need for some things. So,
And as far as the meetings, those are on the third Thursday.
roughly,
Third Thursday.
I'll work with Lisa to get a definite schedule out in the next month and make sure it works with you, and then forward it, make sure it works with the planning board as well.
So typically we'll be meeting on the third Thursday, 9 a.m. So, okay. So it will be my goal then for you all to have on the 10th, the first section of the audit that will help, start the process so that when we come in on the 17th, we'll have some material to discuss.
So we're still looking at August, no sooner, but could be later of that first meeting.
August?
No, we're gonna.
So assuming that
We're moving.
that everything is fine for us to keep, we'll meet on the third Thursday in February, and
Okay.
and they will have had material given to them in advance at that point in time.
Okay. All right.
And then we'll be underway, barring some unforeseen circumstance.
All right, so you don't see meeting the 20th of January then?
No, sir.
A week from today. It would be the
So
second,
we would,
the third Thursday in February, the 17th.
And that'll just start our process, and so we will just plan. And Lisa's here too, so I don't want to speak out of turn, but you would just plan for you guys to always be here on that third Thursday, and that meeting will be dedicated to the UDO.
so we need to get the material in the mailbox before that meeting or at a regular planning board meeting on the 3rd or whatever the hell it is, 4th or whatever.
The third.
I'll work with
Third.
Wes.
Oh, I move that we schedule the UDO update, I guess, is that the right term?
Yes.
For the third Thursday of each month,
9 a.m.
9 a.m.,
council chambers.
council chambers.
Second.
Seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
I will update that and get that to everybody as soon as possible.
Right. That's really what I wanted to accomplish today. So I appreciate you having me here, and hope that kind of help you guys, if you didn't, better understand, the path forward here.
Good. We're excited. This is important.
It is.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right, Wes, really appreciate it. Now that we've concluded with new business item number 5, any other items from Ron or Sybil for planning board discussion? I'd like to entertain a motion. We adjourn the meeting.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting's officially adjourned.